Hey there, interwebs. I've got my Star Wars crop top on here, as well as got my boy, the clone trooper here. Got Fives right here hanging out, at least, or his disembodied head that I've now broken and disturbed myself there. Because I want to quick have a discussion about the most recent episode of Star Wars The Mandalorian, and why the longer that I think about that episode, the more it kind of angers and frustrates me. Because, as many of you know, I review every episode of The Mandalorian here on this channel, as well as a lot of other Star Wars shows, most specifically my favorite recently, which was Star Wars Andor. And the reason that I adored Star Wars Andor so much was that it was a show that understood the core of what Star Wars as a franchise was always about from its conception. Star Wars was always a political series right to its core, going back to George Lucas having written the original trilogy, and especially the first Star Wars, to quite literally talk about American imperialism. He spoke about how it was about the Vietnam War, how Palpatine in the original trilogy was meant to represent Nixon. And then when we get into the prequel trilogy, for all of their faults, they both presaged and commented upon as it went along the further fall into sort of nationalism and the sort of line of empire that we got right now, very much echoing the rhetoric of George Bush's War on Terror, but sort of presaging even further fall into sort of declining nationalism, capitalist infighting, and fascism rising in those prequels trilogies. Now, again, those movies have their issues, but that was the goal and the intent of those films. And that was brought back by Star Wars Andor after a long time with Disney, while still having some politics in those movies, trying to downplay them in the public sphere as much as possible, in a way that George Lucas never really did. And again, I have my own issues with George Lucas. I'm doing a whole video on Star Wars, so I've been thinking about this a lot. You'll see it on my main channel in the next few weeks or months. Anyways, Andor was all about like bringing back these politics front and center to Star Wars, and it was a very clearly anti-fascist work of media. That brings us to The Mandalorian, and this season I've actually been surprisingly pleased with a lot of what this season has been. Now, I get The Mandalorian is much more of Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni saying, like, look, we want to have our kind of fun adventure time Star Wars too, and that's totally cool. I'm not saying that every, like, work of Star Wars art needs to be, like, some big grand statement about the sweeping political landscape that we have going on here. That is, I think, what a lot of Star Wars should be in the main element of it, but by no means do I think every part of it has to be that. Same thing with Star Trek. I think Star Trek can be super political and also be weird and silly at the same time. I understand that element of it, but I've been really enjoying the parts of the season where we get to see the New Republic. And we get to see that after the Empire fall, the sort of New Republic, the democracy that forms after, it's still mired in bureaucratic failings. It's still mired in, like, the sort of, like, neoliberalist project of, like, worrying too much about bureaucracy and not actually helping people, and sort of causing a lot of democratic inaction that does lead people to be frustrated with democracy and falling right back into authoritarianism, fascism, because they feel like the state isn't really working for them. This is a cycle that we see over and over again with these systems. And I think that Mandalorian's actually been showing that surprisingly well, in an interesting way. Unfortunately, that kind of goodwill came to a screeching halt with its most recent episode, I believe Chapter 16, Guns for Hire. We had this, like, weird sidetrack storyline, which is fine. Mandalorian's always about the, like, side questy, like, we're gonna go off the main beaten path, and it's very frustrating for those of us who want to follow the main story, but that's kind of what this show has always been since season 1. But the main part of that episode that really ticked me off and really upset me is that the whole episode seemed to be building up to this conspiracy that the droids on this one planet that had become, like, the working class of the planet, like, no one else worked, it was all the droids that, like, worked for everybody.
The citizens voted against any interruption in droid services. They can't live without it.
And why is that?
The citizens are no longer required to work. They can spend their days engaging in recreation, the arts, and participating in our direct democracy.
It seemed like they were building up to the droids actually kind of rebelling against the upper class that were sort of taking advantage of them. In fact, we even see the upper class sort of like having fun, playing games, doing whatever, and there's sort of these droids that are sort of breaking down, and we don't know why. In fact, even the people building the droids are like, we don't break these, the droids don't break, there shouldn't be any problems. And I'm like, oh, is this what they're building towards? We've had hints of that in other Star Wars projects. Solo, the Star Wars story did elements of that, even though it made a joke of it. But still had elements that clearly these droids were sentient beings that kind of wanted liberation, or were at least capable of desiring it beyond the intents of the people who created them. And so I'm like, oh, is this what they're building towards? Like actually talking about the droids self-actualizing, the worker class rising up and fighting against their oppressors. You know, workers of the world unite, quite literally. And I was like, hell yes. Very great. That's not the direction that they went, though. Because what we ultimately find out is that actually the person messing with the droids was Christopher Lloyd, of all people, who was like a separatist who still has like loyalties to Count Dooku. That's a whole other knot to untangle when it comes to Star Wars politics.
I didn't give up to the corrupt Republic. I didn't give up to the Empire. And I won't give up to you.
You're a separatist.
But the part that I want to focus in on is we go to a droid bar, which showcases that the droids like have off time. They try to relax. They try to refuel by drinking drinks. We learn that they like get like reprogrammed by the drinks or whatever, some Star Warsy nonsense, sciencey, wincy stuff. And so it's like clearly they like hang out and have fun and have like desires beyond just like doing their job. But then we meet the head guy of the bar, the bartender, and he's sort of like, yeah, actually, we like working for organics. We just want to show our goodwill towards organics, and someone else is actually manipulating us behind the scenes and fucking with us. It's not us who wants this. We just want to be the good working class and show how much we really like the working for these people.
Most of us have been refurbished and reprogrammed. Some droids on Plaisir date back to the Separatists. The New Republic would send them to scrap, but here on Plaisir they are given a second chance.
Well, these catastrophes don't help your argument.
Exactly. That's why we need your help. We don't want to be replaced. We still have a lot to contribute. Human life is so short. They don't ask that much of us. Organics created us. It's the least we can do.
And do you want to know what that really gave me vibes of? House elves from Harry Potter. Not to get into a whole J.K. Rowling discussion right here, but one of the major problems with house elves in Harry Potter is that the house elves are a worker class race, quite literally enslaved, that need to be taught that they are enslaved. In fact, most of the house elves in that series, save for Dobby, and even he sort of like takes a while to get there and still has a lot of problems in terms of like still viewing Harry Potter as a master, they need to be taught that they are enslaved by the upper class people who understand that they are oppressed and that we need to come on down to let them know that we think benevolently of them. They're full people too. Why don't they realize that? And it's very much this like kind of white savior-esque sort of vibe to it. Upper class vibe is like savior vibes to it. Of like, we're the benevolent ones. We understand your plight. Except for here in the Star Wars universe, that doesn't even have that element of it. The droids are just quite literally like, we're working class. And everyone's like, yeah, that's cool. We're here for you on that front. Cool. Yeah. And even like characters like, you know, Luke sort of sell off R2-D2 and C-3PO and let them possibly get tortured under Jabba the Hutt for his own plans. And I know he planned to rescue them, but like he's still sort of like, yeah, go get tortured without me telling you that I was going to make you agree to that part of the plan beforehand in Return of the Jedi.
Acquisitions.
And so our main characters even sort of like mistreat and don't view droids as full people when they clearly are. And then we have episodes like this one of The Mandalorian where it seems like they're building to like recognizing that, and then it's like, nah, we like being the working class. We just like it. And unlike the house elves, which are also very problematic and quite literally were tied to black people in slavery through the Fantastic Beasts movies, instead of having even like people care, which is its own problem, and it even has that white savior aspect. We don't even get that in Star Wars. Everyone's like, it's fine. In fact, the episode even has a moment where Bo-Katan shoots Christopher Lloyd and goes, politics.
Politics.
And it's just like, it feels like Jon Favreau was just like, I don't like these politics in my here Star Wars. I just want to have my fun adventure Star Wars. And like, again, it's fine to want your fun adventure Star Wars, but if you're brushing up on political themes like this and talking about these things, and then just to go, yeah, that's slavery, race or whatever. Who cares about politics in my Star Wars? Like, that's really fucked up and leans into sort of the denial of the inherent implications of this universe that goes back to its core, that was always trying to be indicting of American imperialism and issues within America, and certainly had its own problems. Again, see the droids throughout the entire franchise, even under George Lucas, but was aiming to be that. And for this episode to sort of reinforce really problematic stereotypes of working class folks, especially folks who are denied being seen as full people, as just like, they just want to work for the upper class. They want to work for us. That's what they're meant to be, is really has fucked up implications. And it really, honestly, you know, I did a review of that episode, and I was sort of wrestling with it as I just reviewed it after I watched it. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, ugh, gross. Star Wars Andor wouldn't do this. Star Wars Andor had B2 Emo, who was the most adorable droid and was actually treated like a person in that series. That droid had so few scenes in that series, and yet characters around him treated him like a full person. Like when someone died in that show and B2 Emo was upset at her death because he cared about her, other people didn't see, like, get back to work. They waited with him and showed moments to, like, let him grieve and come to emotionally understand and grieve for her death. And he was treated as a full person.
I'll have them clear the room if you want to be alone.
I don't want to be alone. I want Mama Marva.
It's the only Star Wars property in recent memory that I think really treated a droid as a full person. We've had droids that were, like, fun, like BB-8 and, you know, Chopper in Star Wars Rebels. They were treated as, like, companions, but not really, like, fully part of the gang as, like, a full person. B2 Emo, to my mind, is the closest we get to that. Even R2-D2 is still treated like a character to be used. And so I think to reinforce that and sort of these very sort of supremacist, capitalistic vibes in more imperialistic than capitalistic, colonialist actually, vibes in Mandalorian, it really bothered me, and I just needed to rant about it.